next door. That's it. Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rashid Akil. I am the chair of the Review Board. At this time on Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021, the meeting of the Citizen Review Board is now called to order. If you will, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you will, please conduct the roll call.
Banks, Collins, Simmons, Tamayo, Reyes, Guy, Akil,
Present.
Blair, and Ngandela.
Let the record show all members of the Citizen Review Board is present with the exception of Jeff Blair, Mr. Banks, and Mr. Ngandela. At this time, I will ask Vice Chair, Ms. Irene Guy, to read the meeting guidelines.
Thank you, Chair. Please silence all electronic devices. The duties and responsibilities of the Citizen Review Board are to review completed department investigations involving use of force in cases of importance and interest in the community or the city. Determine whether, the disposition of reviewed cases, was it consistent with department policies and procedures? Review matters of importance or interest and make recommendations regarding the handling of these matters. Determine whether any revisions or additions to department policies and procedures are appropriate in reviewing matters of or importance or interest, and report findings and recommendations to the mayor and chief of police. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition. It is the Citizen Review Board's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to departmental policies and procedures. The Citizens Review Board members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. The Citizens Review Board will hear from the department whenever matters of interest or importance are requested for review by the board or the department. As will be further discussed by the chair, members of the public will have an opportunity to address the Citizens Review Board during the public comment portion of the meeting. The coordinator for the board is Captain Kevin Schoolmeister. Any person who wishes to make a complaint concerning a matter which may be considered by the Professional Standards Bureau should see Captain Schoolmeisters for information or how to file a complaint. The chair is responsible for maintaining an appropriate business-like decorum during the meeting. The board should not discuss matters where the city or the department may likely be party to litigation. The public comment portion of the meeting is coming up early on the agenda, so if you wish to speak, please line up at the kiosk so that you can be called in order. Please maintain social distancing and wear your masks.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We now move on to item D, approval of the minutes. The minutes have been provided to all members in advance. Are there any questions or provisions? Hearing none, I would need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the May meeting.
Second.
Board Member Dr. Collins has made a motion to approve the minutes of the Tuesday, May 25th, 2021 meeting. Mr. Tamayo has seconded the motion of approval of the minutes for the Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item E, public comment. Are there any participants signed in for the public comment portion of this meeting?
I believe there is somebody downstairs at the kiosk. If we can manage to get the technology working, we would like to go to the kiosk.
So we do have one participant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would ask for you to state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Before I begin, may I have an extra minute or so?
I'm sorry, can you say again?
Before I begin, is it possible for me to have an extra minute or so, please?
Yes.
My name is Sandra Zickery, that's Z-I-K-R-Y. My address is 11718 Braintree Lake Lane, apartment 8, Tampa, Florida, 33647. Good evening. This is in regards to case number 20C-164. I have concerns I would like to address. The Tampa Police has had my case for a year and denied all allegations. April 2021, a certified handwriting expert confirmed that the hospital forged my consent forms to a procedure I stated I did not want. A doctor stated there is no medical indication for this procedure. I quote, "In the eyes of the law, the mother's rights to control what happens to her body trumps any rights the fetus has. Hospitals cannot force a woman to undergo a procedure or treatment without her consent, even to save the life of the fetus. I have consulted with the Polk County State Investigator about the facts of the case and has informed me that due to the fact that there's an improper dosage given to me, henceforth, as it is a narcotic, it may be deemed as attempted murder and aggravated battery. Statements from doctors and vitals show that there was an immediate and dangerous drop in heart rate of both myself and my baby. Over the weekend, there has been concerns that the baby's heart rate may have stopped a few times. I am currently injured with a cerebral spinal fluid leakage and adhesive arachnoiditis. The law states fentanyl is listed as a murder weapon, and doctors are regulated by the Florida drug laws of how much can be given. I have consulted with the Department of Health about the facts of the case and was informed that due to the fact that the consent forms are forged, it would constitute to battery, thus also informed me that these matters would fall under the jurisdiction of the Tampa Police. I have consulted with the mayor's office at the fact that no one is helping me and was informed they will see what they can do and attempt to contact the chief. I have submitted all evidence to the chief's assistant. The police claim they will attempt to reach out the state attorney investigator for quote-unquote assistance, but yet have not done so. They claim they cannot persecute the forgery because of the statute of limitations and rarely acknowledge the other counts of crime because they quote-unquote don't believe it is battery for whatever their reasoning is, but also believe they may be quote-unquote missing something. However, according to the Florida criminal law, there is delayed discovery rules. According to the FDA, the use of fentanyl is not even recommended during labor and delivery. I have provided the Tampa Police many pages of cited laws, case studies, and medical literature. I do not see any further excuses not to persecute the numerous crimes the hospital has committed. You are taking away my dreams and my aspirations. I have resided my seat of I have resided my nursing seat of 2021, and the university I attend is really pushing for me to become a physician. By not enforcing the law, you are being negligent, just as the hospital, and you are violating my constitutional rights and amendments. This is not freedom, this is oppression.
Thank you. And we had a challenge hearing you in the beginning of your dialogue. If you will, can you repeat the case number this is in reference to again, please?
Yeah, sure. It's case number 20C-164.
If I'm not mistaken, is this your second appearance in the public comment
It
section?
is, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you recall your first appearance here at the Citizen Review Board?
Absolutely.
Thank you for your dialogue.
Am I able to ask you any questions?
At this time, we will look at this case concluded, or is it still open in investigation?
See, they claim they closed the case, but
So the
there's-
case is closed?
Yeah, but they're still looking into it. So I mean, I told them I think it's best to open the case. I don't know. They're not listening to me.
Thank you for your dialogue.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
I will now ask whether there were any recorded comments received through voicemail set up for this meeting. Madam Clerk. Mike Schmidt.
Yes, sir. Mike Schmidt. We did check the voicemail line, and there were no recorded voicemails received.
I will now ask if the clerk received any written comments for this meeting. Dr. Collins.
Yeah, just in closure that you asked a question and she didn't know, is the case open or closed? I know she's been here before, and I just don't want it to appear that at least we didn't.
I believe she stated the case was closed.
It is.
That would conclude the public comment portion of this meeting. We will now continue with the agenda under item F, review of investigation. Tonight, we will be reviewing PSB/IAU case number 20F-004 involving an internal affairs investigation following a complaint from the spouse of an officer in which the following police violations were sustained: MOR number 01005, standard of conduct; MOR number 1201, incompetence; MOR number 1204, attentiveness to duty; MOR number 1504, firearms/weapons; MOR number 1807, and legal bulletin number 11-16. Documentation of searches, IDP number 706.00, procedures for entering mobile devices; SOP number 339, entry and deposition of property; SOP number 609.1, assigned vehicle program; SOP number 635.7, license plate seizure; and SOP number 821, search and seizures, violation of legal bulletin number 14-11 was sustained. I will now ask, we have a representative.
Yes, I'm Corporal Katie Thanasis with the Internal Affairs Unit within Professional Standards, and I'll start with the disposition. For 20F-004 synopsis, on March 12, 2020, Kimberly Jackson contacted the Internal Affairs Bureau and filed a complaint against her husband, Officer Joshua Jackson. The complaint alleges that Officer Jackson, A, obtained items from traffic stops without placing them into property, B, bragged about snatching people up and beating them while performing his job, C, took leave without using his accrued time, D, conducted fake operations in a strip club, and E, drove his assigned police vehicle while off duty to Orlando, Disney, on a family trip, to St. Pete Beach to work out, to Lakeland for a field trip to chaperone his children. And the overall investigation found multiple administrative policy violations. As to allegation A, Extensive searches in Versadex and AIM were conducted, but this investigation was unable to locate any calls or reports in reference to the alleged items from traffic stops not being placed into property. During Officer Jackson's testimony concerning his failure to enter property into evidence, Officer Jackson stated he found several items discarded in a trash can, he found some items in the roadway, and that he had no idea where other items came from. However, Officer Jackson did admit to taking and failing to place into property a knife from an arrestee during an investigatory search. During this investigation, a stolen birth certificate was found in Officer Jackson's assigned vehicle by the Professional Standards Bureau, which was taken during an auto burglary. Officer Jackson failed to investigate as he did not research the information on the birth certificate. A check of the name would have revealed it was stolen during an auto burglary. When Officer Jackson was relieved of duty, Internal Affairs detectives searched his assigned vehicle and located the following items: a Taurus 9mm firearm, which was personally owned, in the center console, a Texas license plate located in the trunk, and 2 cell phones. Officer Jackson stated he removed the tag from a suspicious vehicle or on a traffic stop and did not place it into evidence. Officer Jackson confirmed the 2 cell phones were located during a hit-and-run investigation and not placed into property. He placed both phones in the side pocket of his assigned vehicle as he was going to write search warrants on the phones. Officer Jackson stated he turned one cell phone on and the screen displayed lost iPhone. He stated that he attempted to turn on the second phone, but that the phone could not be turned on because the battery was dead. In addition, Officer Jackson did not document these actions. As to the allegation B, that Ms. Jackson gave a specific time period to the allegation, and that was that he quoted that he snatched people up and beat them. Ms. Jackson alleged he described a call that he responded to at the Hard Rock Casino where someone lost teeth as a result of his use of force. Officer Jackson denied this allegation. The activity log obtained for the dates in question could not substantiate this allegation, nor were there any calls located where Officer Jackson responded to the Hard Rock Casino. It should be noted Hard Rock Casino is not in Tampa Police Department's jurisdiction, therefore it is unlikely this even occurred. As to the allegation C, Ms. Jackson alleged that Officer Jackson used unreported annual leave on December 21st through the 24th of 2019. A check in Telestaff showed Corporal Keith Carlson entered the annual time used by Officer Jackson. As to allegation D, the allegation to the fake operation was investigated and the proper paperwork was completed. The squad conducted an approved operation at the Gold Club in an attempt to identify a person of interest in a shooting whose girlfriend was thought to work at the establishment and would have been able to identify one of the shooters. Contact was never made with the female. There were some issues regarding the details and supervision of that operation, and they were investigated under PSB 20F006. As to the allegation E, Ms. Jackson alleged that Officer Jackson constantly used his assigned vehicle while off duty. Internal Affairs detectives were able to confirm via toll records, gas receipts, compared to his work schedule, this was not consistent with his work schedule. That was a total of 5 times 648 miles, 10 gas charges, totaling $247. And Officer Jackson admitted to doing this. Based on my complete review of the investigation completed by Professional Standards Bureau concerning the allegations brought forth, I conclude the investigation disclosed sufficient evidence to sustain multiple allegations. Furthermore, a review of roll call training given by Chief Dugan, in which Officer Jackson attended on June 19, 2019, covered improperly disposing of evidence, failing to submit required reports, documenting searches, and further discussed how officers' credibility issues could compromise court cases. Now into the findings of the allegations. Officer Jackson's on-duty and off-duty conduct compromised his professionalism, ethics, and objectives as a police officer, as well as the professionalism, ethics, and objectives of the department. Additionally, his conduct impaired his ability to perform as a police officer. Therefore, I recommend the violation of MOR 1005 standard of conduct is sustained. Department employees shall maintain sufficient competency to properly perform their duties and the responsibilities of their position. 4 or more documented and sustained violations of Tampa Police Department regulations, general orders, standard operating procedures, or other written directives within a 2-year period will also be considered evidence of incompetence. Therefore, the violation of MOR 1201 incompetence is sustained. Officer Jackson failed to properly investigate by not supplementing report 2118847, following up on a birth certificate that was found in a vehicle involving a hit and run, submitting all required property on a timely basis and in accordance with department procedures. Therefore, the violation of MOR 1204 attentiveness to duty is sustained. Officer Jackson failed to exercise all reasonable precautions in securing his personal firearm that he was qualified to use as a duty weapon from unwanted access when he left it in the center console of his assigned city vehicle. Therefore, the violation of MOR 1500 firearms weapons, specifically 1504, is sustained. Officer Jackson failed to fully document the searches presumably related to the evidence located from assumed traffic stops and failed to document evidence recovered. Therefore, the violation of MOR 1807, failure to comply, departmental policies to wit, Legal Bulletin 1116, documentation of all person, structure, or vehicle searches is sustained. Cell phones found on an arrested person or in their car or home may not be searched without a warrant unless because of a serious emergency. The phone may be searched without a warrant. Again, exigent circumstances must be well documented. Officer Jackson did not violate this legal bulletin by turning the cell phone on. Therefore, the violation of Legal Bulletin 1411, search of cell phones, is not sustained. The procedure for entering a mobile device into powered storage are as follows. Place the device into airplane mode if possible. Remove the SIM card if possible and secure with the device. Complete evidence entry documenting per current procedure. Transport the device to the impound lot and inform the evidence technician it is to be placed in powered storage. Officer Jackson failed to do the following, therefore the violation of IDP 706, procedures for entering a mobile device into powered storage within evidence, is sustained. Officer Jackson failed to submit for secure storage all property which came into his custody as required by policy or law, and to authorize the disposal of such property in an appropriate and timely manner. Therefore, the violation of SOP 339, entry and disposition of property deposited in the evidence control section, is sustained. Detectives were able to confirm via toll records and gas receipts that Officer Jackson regularly drove and transported his family within his assigned vehicle while off duty. Officer Jackson also readily admitted to violating this policy. Therefore, violation of SOP 609.1, assigned vehicle program, is sustained. Officer Jackson admitted to removing a tag from either a traffic stop or an abandoned vehicle. He failed to place the tag as found property or evidence. Therefore, the violation of SOP 635.7, license plate seizures, is sustained. Officer Jackson failed to fully document the search of person when removing the knife off the subject he came into contact with. Therefore, the violation of SOP 821, search and seizure, all searches of persons, is sustained.
Mr. Tamayo?
Corporal Thanasis, you referenced that Officer Jackson was relieved of duty.
Yes.
Was this independent of the allegations made by his spouse?
No, that was the day that she,
of...
yes, the day she called us and made the allegations, he was relieved of duty.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Banks?
Am I to understand that the investigation was initiated as a result of the complaint of the spouse?
Yes.
So what concerns me is, are there internal controls that, I mean, you have a lot of violations here, that if the spouse had not made the complaint, what controls or what policies or procedures are in place to detect such violations?
If you give me a specific violation, I can maybe elaborate on it.
Well, I'm just
Which one?
overwhelmed by all of them.
I mean, I don't know how to answer for all, I think it's 12
Well,
violations as a general topic.
Mr. Tamayo?
Yeah, Reverend Banks, I'm with you on that. Just as one example, is there a way that a regular audit can be made of the assigned vehicle to an officer, of the mileage being used on that vehicle? It's something like that. Are there protocols in place? Because there really seem to be quite a few violations, and if not for the fact that it was brought to light by the officer's spouse, we would have never known about them.
The vehicle mileage is typically entered when you use your gas card, department issued gas card. So when we slide that card in, we have to enter the vehicle mileage and our vehicle number. He lives in Lakeland. I don't know, I can't speak for how it catches mileage versus if we use the lowest grade gas, if it uses a higher grade gas. I don't know how it does that. We do have to have a monthly inspection of our vehicles. However, that's the equipment, make sure it's properly working. Make sure the car isn't a complete disaster, a mess, things like that.
That's why Captain Schoolmeisters, Professional Standard Bureaus, also the officers are required monthly to submit a written report of their mileage, and when it comes in, that's up to the supervisor to review to see if there's any abnormalities to it, and there's a separate IA case that spawned from this one for the supervisor as well.
But there was a number of items that were in the trunk of his assigned vehicle.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
If you, If you will, Ms. Simmons, go ahead and continue.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So I guess, like, are there new policies or being written that, I know you're saying you do the monthly vehicles, but you're saying more like check to make sure like the vehicle isn't like.
The lights are working.
That's what,
Yeah, this is
equipment
more
that, like-
also the supervision failure, which what the supervisor was disciplined for. Every month, we're required to do vehicle inspections, so that, you know, they should have looked through all that and noticed it in their car.
A lot of the property was also, like the Texas license plate was under his gym bag, under several items in the very back of his trunk, specifically that one. I don't know how long that one was there. The 2 cell phones were in the passenger side door pocket in the door. Those were there 6 days. So I don't know, the inspection may not have happened. I'm sure the sergeant, if he had seen that, probably would have sparked something, but those were there 6 days. So I don't know, a lot of the property, we don't know where it came from. I don't know how long it was there.
Comment.
Reverend Banks.
Yeah, it just seems to me that, was there some discussion at the department level to determine if there's a failure in supervision in areas that would cause so many violations to occur without knowledge? I mean, it just seems to me that something should have been in place to raise a red flag or something, because the number of violations that you indicated, I mean, I can't even remember all of them. And so it just seems to me, have you had any conversation as to, is this an anomaly or is this something that is?
Yes, it's a failure of supervision. The sergeants are supposed to maintain discipline on their squad and create, you know, monthly inspections, and the supervisor failed in this. He was investigated on a separate case.
Okay, I think perhaps that coupled with this case perhaps would provide some level of comfort to me personally, as well as the community, because to hear all of this violation and to not hear that there is something in place, but it was failed because of the lack of supervision.
No,
would
there's plenty
perhaps
of-
include that as part of the report so that it would be a comprehensive presentation to the public, because just to hear all of this and to hear nothing else other than that,
Well,
what is going on?
No, I mean, we have standard operating procedures, we have manual regulations that fill what the officer, what the supervisor should and should not do to maintain that. And as a supervisor, I can attest to you is that it was a failure of supervision. There's
Okay.
policies in place, just the supervisor failed to enforce it.
So that makes me feel a little better to hear that we had these violations. They probably occurred not only because of the officers, their election of duty, but also because of a lack of supervision. And these are the things that we've done to ensure that this does not happen again. Because this is certainly a very serious.
Yes, and the supervisor was held to account as well.
Repeat that.
Mr. Tamayo.
Captain Schoolmeisters, at the next meeting, could we have a review of the protocols that are used by the supervisors to audit what's in the vehicles, what is happening on a monthly basis?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they're obviously to do it, you know, cleanliness, if there's anything out of the ordinary in them. We had a case, and Chief Dugan came here and spoke in front of you all beginning of last year, to Officers Larada and Larandry. He was part of this group, and that supervisor was demoted because he failed to follow, to do his duties as a supervisor.
I think that's a great point, Mr. Tamayo. Part of our duties and responsibilities is to be able to educate the public of such audits and protocols, and I think it also supports transparency. So if we can have that list or steps taken to ensure these type of violations will be looked at prior to its existence and what's the check and balance, I think that'd be a great educational tool for our citizens.
Yeah, the department, and that's part of my unit as well, was quality assurance parts to it. We audit 14 parts of things that, you know, we're doing, we say we're doing, we should be doing, and inspections, just like the body-worn camera reviews and whatnot, are part of that. So every month, we submit a report to the chief outlining what squads didn't document or didn't do the inspections for that month. Also falls under that is general training, high liability training. Each month the sergeants are required to provide that, and when we audit that every monthly.
Dr. Collins?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My question would be pretty consistent with Dr. Bank and Mr. Tamayo. When we get a case like this and it become public information, because when we get it, then it goes to the public as well, it would have been nice to have the supervisors something in here, because it doesn't look like it was just had his wife not had some problems apparently with him and decided to come out. It never would have happened. But would it be possible when we come back and look at the monitoring techniques, a system that's being used? Because in the case, in the support document that you've cited, I remember reading one about the supervisor check the car, make sure it's clean, see what's in it and things like that. What I would like to see with that document, if it would be okay, considering the supervisor's write-up, which to me goes hand in hand with this one.
Yeah, well, when we investigate a case, it's based mainly on the officer, unless it's one incident, because we looked into Officer Jackson, or former Officer Jackson. That's when the other allegations surfaced. So then we open up a separate investigation into that to document it. So that, like I said, it was documented, and it refers into there. I think it's 20F006. If I don't, my memory doesn't.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's under there. So it would be a separate case.
And so is that a case that, let me ask two questions. One, is that a case we can look at? But more important, even if we do not look at that case, more importantly, was that supervisor who has been reprimanded, was that supervisor whole team looked at to find out if those aberrations was occurring throughout?
Yeah, we went through, we interviewed everybody on that squad to see if there was anything else as well. And during the investigation, not only in this, and to Officer Sergeant Rhodes, who was the sergeant during that period. So.
And in a process like that, when we look at the gas and the mileage, when looking at that, did you have an opportunity with that whole team to look at and see if that was occurring within and those kind of things?
I did evidence audits on everyone on the squad. I looked at all of them. It was my case, this one was.
Okay, I
Yes.
kept hearing you say,
Yes, ma'am.
I did. Okay, so that's good. I just think that when we release this out there, so that just as we looked at it and Dr. Banks indicated, I think it would be nice to kind of attach, indicate that there's and that wasn't clear to me. It was clear to me that we had an upset spouse.
Well, if you
apparently, who
like
came.
that case, the 20F006 is on the list that we provided Chairman Aquil. So if you want us to review that, we could, next meeting,
Yeah,
we
that
can
would
do
be
that
good.
as well.
Okay.
Yes, I think the board has interest in that case. So if you will, we can definitely add that to the review of investigations of the agenda, the item F for next month.
Are there similar cases to that?
Nothing
To
else
006?
from this case. Nothing else was a product
Nothing
of
from this case, but are there similar cases on failure of supervision that are similar in scope?
I mean, it occurs. The one like I mentioned earlier with Sergeant Bottomer, he was demoted because of his failures of checking the body-worn camera, doing similar inspections for those two. But does it happen? Yes.
Right.
It's an anomaly. I mean, but if we look into it, like when we look into this case, not only do we look at that officer, we look at everybody on the squad and make sure it was not a widespread event that, you know, but it seemed to him, he was, I'll leave it at that.
So, but it would be good to see 006 for the depth of the investigation.
Absolutely, I agree. Vice Chair Irene Guy.
I have a different question. This was obviously a domestic situation, so my question is, you said he was relieved of duty the
Yes.
very day that she made the complaint. Did that mean he was relieved of duty with pay until the investigation? Okay,
Yes.
because, you know, husbands and wives have fights all the time.
No,
And so I just wanted to make sure that, and I understand relieving him of duty immediately, but also I understand, you know, he could have been innocent, which he
Yeah,
was
well,
not, but he could have been. And so, you know, during that time period.
Well, being over Professional Standards Bureau, we do get a lot of complaints from domestic partners and spouses. And everyone comes in, we take seriously some amount of things, or like this case, a lot don't. But we look and we take each complaint very seriously and we investigate each complaint.
Thank you.
Dr. Collins?
There was a section in reading these that made reference to the car, issuing of the car, keeping tabs with it, the investigation. I'm just curious, just out of curiosity. You said this officer lived in Lakeland, which meant he also carried his car home to Lakeland. Are there a large number of officers under TPD that's living outside of Tampa and transporting their car? And if the question can't be answered, you
I'm
know.
not sure.
I don't know those exact numbers, but the take-home car policy is very, liberal for us as long as it's an adjoining county. So whether they live in Pinellas, Polk, like this individual did in Pasco, they're allowed to take it to their residence.
And I did see in the policy where there's some things that they have to keep up with or they pay for, something, all of
The
that.
general upkeep, obviously, they have to, preventive maintenances they have to keep up with. Cleanliness, because we provide it, that's on the officer. They wash them and take care of them. So no, there's very strict policies of where you have to park them in your driveway. You can't park it out on the street. You can only use it for police-related business, such as court, if you're working an extra duty job. But this officer was assigned to a plainclothes squad, so he had an unmarked, or what we refer to as cool cars, a regular car, and he took advantage of that.
Well, I selected this case for one or two reasons, if you will. City Council has passed a new ordinance, as I believe that everyone is aware of, with the CRB, with the mayor's support. One in particular is the TPD complaint tracking system, which is a part of this new ordinance, which would be also presented in tonight's agenda in a brief summary as well under item H. This case was brought to Internal Affairs in the format of a complaint, which was responded with Internal Affairs unit investigation, resulting in several sustained policy violations performed by the officer. I believe this case will allow the board to understand the importance of potential new responsibility of complaint tracking and the importance of such tasks. So that was one of the reasons why I selected this particular case, with the complaint tracking being added into the new ordinance to ensure the importance of tracking some of these complaints, looking into it to see if we can identify anything that also assist and help our police department become better. Number two was to support the humane factor. That our officers are, human beings, and human beings are not necessarily perfect, which is subject to, imperfections. Although we do hold our officers to the higher standard, the Tampa Police Department does have a check and balance system with a chain of command to ensure accountability. So the follow-up case in reference to the case of the 20F with the supervisor and finding out the audit tracking system and what goes on with the vehicle of these officers and things of that nature, I think it also supports not only transparency but also accountability. Any other questions for Detective, if you will, Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How long was this officer on the force?
He was
Do you know?
hired in 2015, so about 5 years exactly.
So 5 years. So is that defined as relatively experienced or a
Out
bit
of
young?
20 years, he's a quarter way done.
Okay, because I could see if he were young, a year or 2 years on the force, youth, inexperience, they get nervous, they make mistakes. I get all that. But as they get older, they get more experienced. When I read this, I was shocked. I mean, this thing just jumped off the paper. I mean, it was like egregious. And then I started thinking, wow, what kind of intent did this guy have when he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing? So I just kind of wanted to share that, just kind of looking at the youth, age, experience factor, if that even played into it at all.
I know he was on 5 years. I want to say he was early 30s, or maybe just at 30.
Are there any other questions for Detective Tenassis or Captain Schoolmeister? Thank you. The question before the board is whether we agree or disagree that the investigation and its findings were consistent with department policy and procedures. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can I have a motion?
I move to approve the department's decisions in all of these cases.
Board member Mr. Tamayo has made a motion in support of the sustainment of the findings and investigations were according to department policies and procedures.
Just to clarify, on the sustaining and the not sustained,
And the
there was one case in which it was not sustained.
Board member Vice Chair Irene Guy has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote. All in favor specify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed state by saying no. The motion passes.
And at the conclusion of the
Dr.
motion.
Collins?
Yeah, we will have the, next month, you'll pull those other cases in.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can look at the correlation with the supervisor. Thank you.
Continuing with the agenda, we move on to item G, Community and Tampa Police Department matters. Last month, the board received the 2020 annual report for the CRB. The board had opportunity to review this report. I will now ask TPD Professional Standards Bureau to come forward to address any questions about the report that the board may have.
This is the annual report. Obviously, each one of you received it. It's just basically the call minutes or the meeting minutes from last year. So it's just obviously a review of over everything that we spoke about last year. So does anybody have any questions pertaining to it?
Well, I can definitely add, obviously, 2020 was a peculiar year with the nation facing the COVID-19. One of the things I did recognize and also enjoyed was the large public comment participants that we had to come forward. In that process, there were several requests from several citizens across the nation, but I do want to applaud how the leadership of this city was able to listen, was able to go to the drawing table, so to speak, and put together new programs as well as the updates in reference to the Citizen Review Board. So the public requested and the city has responded. So I'm excited to see what these new programs and how they will assist to ensure a safer environment and also to ensure deter any other negative things in light of that nature. So.
I have one.
Mrs. Tamayo?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the annual report indicated when it spoke about that. I don't know if we enjoyed that particular meeting.
Let's say it was a learning experience.
Yes, yes,
Definitely.
I don't think it referenced that Chief Dugan actually attended that meeting and attended its entirety. I think that should be reflected in the record.
Okay, again, we took what the minutes were, and that's what
Okay.
were placed on the report.
Okay, all right. So just for the record, yeah, Chief Dugan was there the entire meeting.
I think it
If I'm not mistaken,
It's in
it
here.
wasn't a requested invitation. He came on his own accord, and being visible in the audience. There were participants that directed questions towards him, and he was obliged to just come forth and answer some of those questions. So,
And my comment with that is, it is listed under the June that he was there, and also noted that Councilman Louis Vieta also was in attendance and spoke at that meeting, because he wanted the individuals to know. But my concern is, this is for historical purposes. The 2020 annual report has a statement in here on, is it after the June? And it indicates that it was July 2020, no meeting held. The scheduled meeting was canceled due to COVID. And we were meeting at that time, although we reverted back to monthly meetings there every other month. It would be nice for the purpose of history, so when people go back and look at this and see how many meetings we did not have, some of those meetings that we had scheduled, we had to cancel because of COVID. I would like to see a header somewhere or a footnote at the end of the 2020 annual report that would reflect that that was a year of COVID. It will carry us into when we made changes in 2021, but it would be nice to have a footnote. Because if somebody come back and look at this and they go, you know, were they really functional? What were they doing? And we had quite a bit of missed meetings there. So it could be nice if we could put a footnote in.
Or would it be, I mean, just for like August, September, like July, it says scheduled meeting was canceled due to COVID. We just put those on for those two remarks, those notes.
Whichever month, because I remember we decided to go ahead and schedule another meeting, and I can't remember without going and looking back in my notes.
Yeah, it was a because of
Yeah,
COVID.
and it was just, because we kept asking, when could we meet, when could we meet? And they was trying to get things squared away, and then we finally got over to the convention center. But I would like the history to reflect more than one meeting was canceled. Yeah.
and just to add, the meetings that were conducted, there were great challenges, and kudos to the staff that allowed the facility to be available, allowed recording and audio to be available. So the meetings that we did have, there were a lot of participants that put in the extra effort to ensure that we were still able to serve the city.
Ditto.
Thank you, Captain Schoolmeister. The next item on the agenda is item H, CRB staff reports and business. I will request Citizen Review Board Attorney Carl Brody to come forward and provide an overview of the future changes that will be made of this board. And I would then like to hear from TPD legal staff as to suggested implementation of the changes as well, if possible. If there's someone present. If you will, Mr. Brody.
Yes, evening, board members. It's good to be here this evening and to give you and run over the highlights of the changes that occurred on this past Thursday during the city council meeting. To get the highlights of the changes that occurred during the city council meeting last Thursday. Also, what I'll do is I'll send you an updated version with underlines. You can see specifically the longer version of the changes that occurred. So you'll get that through an email later this week. And if you have any questions after that or after our discussion today, just let me know and we can always discuss any matters you have concerns about. To begin, again, we're just going to do a high-level look at the changes that occurred. The council approved a change to just acknowledge the authority of this board, and specifically it talked about supporting effective policing and police reform as part of the purpose. This was an addition. I think that the goal was to make it clear to the public that this was an important responsibility of this board, is to have that oversight authority in terms of effective policing and police reform, just like we discussed, and to also protect civil rights and civil liberties. That's a new addition to what is in the current ordinance. So again, these are kind of aspirational statements that the council provided to encourage the operation of the board and to suggest to the public what the full purpose of these meetings are for. Additional powers include that the board will now ensure that any of the disciplines that occurs that may involve good moral character are forwarded to the Florida Criminal Justice Standards Training Commission. And that's just important to assure that it's being seen outside of the internal operations of the department. Also, and one of the important additions to this ordinance is that this board will now be involved in the hiring process for the police department. You'll be sitting in on interviews, and you'll be able to participate as part of the interview panel. There's a process to that. You will have to vote to choose a member to participate, but you'll be able to rotate in and out whoever those members are. So, you know, the members will sit with the police interview panel for a 6-month period, and then you can just rotate through the members by vote to be sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in the interview panel.
Mr. Brody, is
Yes.
Mr. Tamayo?
one member or 2 or 3, or how does that work?
It will be one member, I believe, that will be part of the interview panel. It'll be one member, and that this board, CRB, will determine by majority vote who that member will be. So with the number of members, it could take a while to get through everybody.
Sure.
But those who are the most interested can, I guess, you know, put their interest forward and explain why they should be voted for to be the participant.
Mr. Brody, I'm aware this is a brief summary, and there's other factors that may play out within the next few months.
Yes.
So I apologize, we don't have all the answers to all the questions. But do we have an idea of, do we hire on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis? What type of rotation is the interviewing process takes place, so we can have an idea on how we can move forward with rotating board members and allowing everyone to participate in such an interview panel process?
Okay, we're going to have Mike Smith answer that question as the TTD attorney.
I was actually going to discuss this after Mr. Brody gave
Okay,
the
well,
overview, so I'm happy to discuss it now, or if you want to wait.
We'll hold our questions to the end.
All right,
Thank you, Mike Schmidt. If you will, continue, Mr. Brody.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Brody.
Yes.
Chair, just one question. As you go through it, you know, I'm kind of writing the high notes, but I kind of had something. I'm not asking you to do this page by page, all 14 pages, but I am saying if you're making reference to something, so I don't have to write it somewhere else and I can just jot a note on it. If you know what page that on, can you just make reference to it? If not, don't worry about it. I don't know how you did your notes.
Here's what I can do is, what I'm using today is kind of a truncated version of what I plan to send to you tomorrow or the next day.
Okay.
And that will have the actual ordinance. We pulled it out, we pulled it all out, and then we went through and underlined the changes.
Okay.
Okay? So hopefully you'll be able to line them up. But if you have any questions when you get that, just contact me. And we'll give you the very specifics to any question. Also, the board will now be informed of the filing of any complaints concerning officer misconduct and to monitor and track those cases. So kind of similar to what you just dealt with, those will be coming to you automatically, and then you'll be able to track those as they move through the process. An additional power that you have now is that you're going to be responsible for at least overseeing the survey every 2 years, a community survey to get public feedback regarding TPD policies and procedures. That's important because there's actually a cost to that obviously we're not going to incur, that TPD will incur, but it'll provide an opportunity to get feedback from the community in an official survey that we'll be able to get responses from, be able to do our own analysis on to determine the successes that we're having or areas where we need to improve. So that's a big addition, is that doing that twice a year, every 2 year survey. We'll be looking at that as it comes forward. One of the big issues was membership, and if you don't know, the membership is not going to change. The members who are on the board now will be on the board through the end of their terms, and for most of us, it looks like it's through 2024. So, if you're a member now, that's not going to change. You will have 2 new members. One who will be suggested or will be nominated by the NAACP, and then recommended by the mayor and approved by the city council. So that will be one of your new members, and the other new member will be a city council representative. And for the city council, 4 of the city council members had to be from each of the different districts, or that'll be the goal, is for one of each of the city council appointees to be from the different districts, and then the other will be from whichever district is available. Qualifications, we've updated that, and I think everybody here has probably already satisfied those, but if you haven't, and new members, they will have to do their TPD Citizens Academy training within 6 months. If that's not done, they can request from the board another month to be able to get that achieved. If it's not, then the ordinance provides for an automatic removal for that person. So it's being made more mandatory. It was mandatory before, but now it's really being focused on in terms of completing that responsibility. And the same will be done for the ride-along responsibility. 6 months, and you can get an extra month, but if not, it'll be automatic removal. So that is a change, or at least it's being enforced by ordinance now, so it's in law now. Our meetings, the only real requirement we have is, absolute requirement, is that we're going to have at least 4 meetings in one of each of the city districts. That means not all meetings will be here anymore. They'll be moved around, 4 of them will be moved around to the different districts. An important thing to note about that is that when we're not here, when we're not in city council chambers, we're not going to be broadcasting on cable, because we don't have the ability to have the broadcast off-site. So that's the one thing to note. We'll only have minutes from those meetings. We won't be able to do what we're doing today. So we'll have 4 of those, and that's a requirement. We're encouraged to have our monthly meetings, but it's as needed. I think we'll be able to find enough work to be able to have a monthly meeting. Okay, we're going to review closed investigations where certain discipline is imposed at the conclusion of a Department of Professional Standards Bureau investigation. That's not much of a change to the authority we have now. And for the decisions, officially at least under the ordinance, our 3 options are to concur, to not concur, or that we're unable to reach a decision. So it's just kind of a procedural thing there. It's concur, not concur, or unable to reach a decision. Within 30 days of the conclusion of our review, CRB will forward written findings and recommendations to the police chief and to the affected officer. So the goal here, I think, is just to provide a more formalized process where we provide the outcomes to the appropriate parties. In this case, it would be the chief of police. And that's in addition to what we previously had. And we're also adding a complaint tracking that we discussed earlier today, that on the first business day of each month, the department is going to provide the chair with a list of all new complaints and a list showing the status of pending investigations that the Professional Standards Bureau is reviewing. So that's going to be a monthly receipt of those matters. And of course, if you see anything of interest, that can be brought forward for the board's review. This CRB is also going to have the option of reviewing any Bureau investigations regarding use of force or any that are of important interest to the community. So that's a broad standard, which gives you a lot of authority in terms of cases that you want to have brought before you for consideration. And when CRB submits a written recommendation to the chief concerning department policies or procedures, the chief is required to respond to those recommendations within 30 days and indicate whether he's accepting it or not. If he's not, then he'll have to give you an explanation of why he's not. So that's another additional power that was not present before in the previous ordinance. And recommendations: in the course of exercising the duties and authorities set forth, the CRB may report findings and make other recommendations that it sees necessary to the chief of police. And it's really an additional avenue that gives this board more authority, more powers to be able to interact directly with the law enforcement department. So it's going to be up to the board how it wants to use these new powers, and I'm sure it'll be a feeling out process to see the authority you have and how you think it's best. It can be best used for the benefit of the public. So I think that's the important thing when you read through the full list of changes. If you think of it in that context, how can we be most efficient and effective in our responsibilities? And finally, of the quick overview, there's going to be an annual presentation to the City Council. The chair will have to come with the TPD coordinator to present the annual report. So that's going to be physical time in front of the City Council, an opportunity to present the report and to have whatever other discussions you think are necessary or that you think would be beneficial to the city and to the City Council. And all members will be encouraged to be at that meeting to the extent that they can be, and will have an opportunity to speak before council for that matter. So again, another additional authority that you have, another additional opportunity to have your voice heard and to be able to achieve the goals that you're intent on in terms of being members of this board and making this an active board that is fully considered and has a level of authority that shows the importance of your responsibilities. Very quick overview. That's a very quick overview. You'll have a chance to read more specifically into what the ordinance changes are. And if we need you, obviously you can call me anytime, and if you need, we can talk about more specific questions you have at the next meeting or any meeting in the future. But of course, right now, any questions you have?
If you will, Ms. Simmons.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Brody. I just have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, we had talked about last month if we were, having the meetings out in the community, so glad to hear we're gonna do that. but I think it was Dr. Collins that brought it up, like, if we could have advance notice so the public knows. I mean, I know we have a ton of people trying to get in here every month.
Right.
But, you
yes.
know, but we had talked about, like, if we know if it's gonna be in the 4 different districts, if they could know that in advance, like, the April meeting's gonna be in District 1, or the June meeting's gonna be in District 2, so the public is not confused about when we're here versus when we're out in the community. I believe we had discussed that, so I just wanted to bring that up. And then my second question was, we had a situation, I don't think it was last year, I think it was the year before, where the board did have a unanimous vote. It was different than TPD's findings. And Mr. Schmidt, you have to remind me, we sent a letter essentially saying like, hey, we're in disagreement. And then he basically sent us a letter back like, okay, thank you, but we're still doing it this way. So my question is like, what is I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, the appeals process, or what happens when like, we all think that the policy is wrong or should be changed? Do we have any recourse, or is it just what we did before, which is sending the letter to say we don't agree?
Let me go with your second question first. Obviously, the cases that come before you are closed already, so the decisions to be made, that's moved along. The goal is to improve TPD's processes. So you did the right thing in terms of if your response is to provide a written explanation for why you disagree. And now you will have authority to, if you have interest in certain policies, to be able to bring those forward on your own. So that's an upgrade or an update to what you can do in response to making change. The final decision is always going to be over with the chief. That's always going to be, he's always going to have the final decision. But you can advocate if you, as a board, believe that the outcome of one of the disciplinary actions was wrong for whatever reason. You can advocate on your behalf by, in a written format.
Yeah,
you know,
it
by
wasn't
responding.
about the outcome being wrong. We thought the policy should be changed. So we agreed that they follow TPD policy. I'm just, again, if we run into a situation like that, I'm just trying to understand what our opportunities to have our voices heard, for lack of a better phrase.
I think under the
I think
new,
it sounds like it's what we did before, you know, which was sending a letter.
right. Or you can make recommendations as to, in that letter, did you make recommendations on what you thought the policy should be? I think that's your authority, and that's pretty much where you're going to be in terms of, you know, just advocating on behalf of what you as a board, what your position is, and provide whatever written reports you decide that express your interest. Regarding the meetings outside of this building, yes, the coordinator will provide notice to the public, and we can work on trying to do a better job of, particularly in those districts, letting them know that this is, you know, probably the one time this year that the board will be meeting in your district. Come out and participate.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Brody?
I
Dr.
have-
Collins?
Yeah. One have already been answered, and at the end of the other one was the issue on communications. And I was glad to say, you know, you would hear, but that's what I didn't see in here, which would have been helpful. The communications of the CRB's activity, what we're doing when we're meeting and where we're meeting, it still needs to be done, and it has not been addressed in the new modified ordinance. So I would hope that would happen. I know this, I saw second reading, so I'm sure that it has passed. But, and I'm gonna go ahead on the membership and organizations on page 3. And on page 3, under D2, that's kind of, I understand it, but that's kind of concerning, because I think each one of the city councilmen that would be having the opportunity to select someone from their district, this kind of leaves the door open where there's a possibility that one councilman may not have someone representing from his district, because that last sentence says, unless no qualified member make an application for an appointment. And I look at those councilmen and their importance and responsibilities to their districts the same way I would look at a CRB person who would be selected by that councilman. And when time comes for the election, you gotta have a city councilman to run in that race. Therefore, we should kind of make sure that, I'm concerned about that point. That's all I wanted to say.
Right.
It's amazing that they may be able to back off and one of those districts may not be represented because they couldn't find a qualified member to apply. I just want to mention it, and it was another one in here where, since we just went through the pandemic, on page 5, when you talked about both the academy as well as the ride-arounds that we have to do.
Correct.
And if you can't get it done in 6 months, but it has nothing to say if it's not scheduled. So if we're going through another crisis, and hope to God Delta goes somewhere else, but if we're going through any other type of crisis, we can give a 1-month extension, but that's all we could give as a board. And somewhere in there, it needs to make sure that when there are extenuating circumstances, these people will not be automatically knocked off because they didn't get a chance to do that. And that could have very well happened.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with that, and I think that if we did run into some similar situation like we've just been through, I'm sure we'd be able to figure out a way to allow exceptions for
Yes,
that. I mean, that would be definitely an extreme circumstance I think would allow us to take some action.
And I think that's it, other than the fact that, thank you so much for mentioning that on going out is given an option as well for the councilman to be at those meetings. But if we're gonna do 4 meetings in the councilman district, if the councilman cannot be there, hopefully he would have someone from their office staff that would represent them. And it would be nice, as we're doing the 4 councilman districts, which kind of abate the 3 police districts, that we have someone to represent both TPD and city council and the mayor's office in those meetings out in the community.
Good suggestion.
And that's a great point, and things of that nature can be brought up on an agenda for the board to discuss and add implementation as well. And we can take advantage of the annual meeting with
Yes.
city council and discussing, deliberating our citizen annual review board report. And those are some things that we can probably implement at that particular meeting if the board felt that it was necessary for discussion and future updates in the future as well.
Yes. Yeah, I
Any
think
other questions for Mr. Brody?
Just a quick question. I don't have the ordinance in front of me. If we're only going to have 4 meetings in the districts, who is going to determine which 4 districts are covered?
No, you'll have one in each district.
In each one.
No.
One in each district.
What is happening? And that's the 4 single-member districts, each of the city council.
Correct.
And we will go in their districts.
Correct.
Right, okay. Therefore, they should definitely have.
Thank you, Mr. Brody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before I call Mr. Mike Schmidt, the chair will also like to recognize City Councilman Chairman Linda Goods, who is in our audience tonight, played a big role in the new updates. Thank you for reaching out and also allowing members' voice to be heard and supporting the new updated ordinance as well. I know earlier today we also had a member from the mayor's office. So, thank you all for the support, and thank you for being present. If you will, Mike Schmidt.
And one question, when Mike Smith finished, can we ask Councilman Gould if you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Joseph.
Oh, I'm sorry, as well as City Councilman Joseph as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If they want to
Thank you for being present.
Do they want to make a comment after Mike?
Hello, Mike Schmidt. I just wanted to give the board maybe some suggestions about going forward for next month. And also I have a request for the board as far as the interview panel. So first, with regards to next month, the July meeting, I know you've already asked for a case to be brought back, and we can certainly fit that on with my suggestion. But I would suggest that this board ask TPD or give TPD the opportunity to come back in July with how we plan to implement these changes. I know there was a lot of changes that Carl Brody just went through, and what we'd like to do is come back in July and try to discuss with the board how the department plans on implementing these changes. So if it's okay with the board, we just ask that that be scheduled for next month.
TPD.
Chair is open to flexibility and availability of the requested case to be reviewed. Floor is open for discussion.
If we
Dr. Collins.
If we complete the case that would be with the supervisor from the case that we had tonight, and then we do not have anything else, we would have the opportunity under community and TPD and our police staff in that area to be able to go over with TPD, city council, the mayor, since everybody all in this, together, so that we would have an opportunity to lay that out.
That would be our preference. We'd like to start a dive into what this all actually means. I know we just gave you a brief overview of what was passed, but now we'd like to actually come back and say, this is what we actually intend, this is what we think will, and I'll talk about the interview panel a little bit tonight, but we'd like to come back and say, this is what we intend on how to carry this out. Eventually, this board will need to pass new policies and procedures, and Carl Brody will work with you on changing the policies and procedures for the board that will need to be implemented. And so that we are working, what we'd like to see is that this board work on all these changes and figure out how they're actually going to be implemented before they actually all take place. We're anticipating at this point that they actually will not take place until probably January of 2022. However, that does not prevent this board, one, from working on getting these all ready so that we hit the ground running in January. And two, there's also nothing, as Chief Dugan came last month and presented to this board and said that we can actually start some of these changes now. I think you actually are seeing some of these changes now as the attorney, Carl Brody, is here with the city attorney's office. So you have a legal advisor separate from the department here tonight, and he was here last month. So we already are starting to implement some of these changes now. Another one that we'd like to implement, working with you now, is on the interview panel, and the chief wanted this board to go ahead and get involved in the interview panel. So rather than waiting till January, we're asking that this board consider going ahead with the same process that's mentioned in the ordinance. The process in the ordinance that's mentioned, that was referred to earlier, would be that one member at a time would be on the interview panel. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons for that, but right now, the short version is that one of you at a time would be on the interview panel, and it says minimum of twice a year would rotate off. So that means it could be 6 months, but you could choose to do it shorter. You can make it 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever the board decides. I would recommend 6. Well, let me tell you what it's going to entail, and then you can decide how long you might want to volunteer for. You could actually do it different periods of times if different members didn't want to serve quite as long. So I think that's things for this board to decide. But let me give you a quick overview of what we're anticipating it to entail. Obviously, next month we may have even more details for you, but right now what we're asking for is one member to be appointed by this board upon a motion. So you will obviously have to have a discussion on who wants to serve, and then make a motion, and if you would give us a member, we would reach out to that member and make sure all the details are provided to that member in the next coming weeks. But just so you know what you're walking into, I guess, the time commitment wise, I'd like to give you a short overview here. What we're thinking is the next hiring selection is going to be the week of August 9th. What it's going to entail is the week prior, it's going to require reviewing approximately 30 applicants. And we anticipate about 15 minutes per applicant review. So if that's true, that's 7.5 hours. So what I'm anticipating is 8 hours, I would say, I'll round up. 8 hours for the week of August 2nd. And then when the interviews actually begin on the week of August 9th, we're anticipating that's going to be 1 to 2 days. So let's say 2 days. So right now what we're anticipating is 8 hours the week of August 2nd and 2 days the week of August 9th. If you think you could provide that service for TPD, we would appreciate that we go ahead and get one person nominated. As far as amount of time for service, that's up to the board. Maybe we start with 4 months. I can't tell you when the next interview panel will be during the next 4 months. Other than this August date, that's the only one that's set right now. But, it's likely there would be another one, if not more, during the 4-month period that you would serve. So what I would like to see is if the board can discuss, have a motion nominating somebody, and if approved, that person be selected to sit on the interview panel for the next 4 months.
I have a question.
Chair is open to discussion in reference to the selection of a member who has interest and time availability to participate in the interview panel on the dates of August 9th, 1 to 2 days, and also on August 2nd, approximately 8 hours as well.
I have a question.
Dr. Collins?
Training, some type of in-service education, preparation of the CRB board members. When would that occur, so we have an idea, so we go in there with a level of intellect and know what we're doing? And is that something that could be done to all board members, and then everybody will know what they're, what is, it's time element is fine, but being astute on what you're doing with that time is also as key. I'm interested, but I want to know what am I, not just time, what kind of training, in-service education, preparation on what we're looking at and that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I thought we would all have so everybody can go in whenever they went in, whatever the time factor is.
Sure. Again, if somebody were to be selected this time around, right, if you're willing to do that, they will reach out to you in the next week, and I'm sure that they are going to cover with you all the training you would need, explaining the process in more details. And again, because this is, obviously we know this just passed last Thursday, and we're working on trying to get this implemented as quickly as we can. We do want to come in July and give, as many of the details as we can. Right now, I guess I'm sort of asking you to trust that we're going to train you. We're not going to hang you out to dry. So somebody, I can't tell you that we have all the pieces in place at this very second, but we will. So if you're willing to work with us, we'll get you trained prior to the August selection. And we'll have to do it probably just on an individual basis as prior to your serving. So as every member serves, I presume you'll just be trained ahead of time. But if we find that that's not an efficient use of time, maybe we'll come back and train you all at once. Again, as we go and look into how we're going to implement this, hopefully we have more answers next month.
Mr. Chair, I got a question. So, couple here. So, listening to you, I think it would be wise, if it's possible, that we all not put the cart before the horse on this. That we actually see if there's a way that you can present the training or at least an overview to all of us, because it's kind of difficult to make a decision on commitment on this date, given what you've told us, when we really don't know. Has nothing to do with trust, has to do with what exactly is required. That's number one. Number two, my question is, and maybe you don't know this, but as a member sitting on that interview board, and many of us have sat on many interview boards, what is it that this board is expecting of us? From what perspective are we asking the questions? Is it based on the training you're going to give us? Or is it based on our unique life experiences, who we are and where we've come from as part of this community? So I think that's kind of important. The third thing has to do with, because you can't tell us the frequency of these boards, if you will,
The interview panels.
the interview panels, perhaps we should consider more of, and I hate to use this military term, but a duty roster, where after we're all trained and qualified, then we already have a list, and that way we already have people available, because things happen to people in their lives and schedules. So if the primary that's due, let's say on this date in August, is unavailable, you already have a second in the hopper, and then a third, because you have a running list, and it just kind of rotates. That way you take care of the entire group of, on the board. So just something to consider, instead of placing the onus on one person for 6 months. To me, I think it's a bit unreasonable to do that. So those were just some of the thoughts I immediately had, just thinking, Mr. Schmidt, when you were covering
Yes, sir.
covering the concept.
Yeah, and these are the things we need to all figure out, all work through, correct?
So Dr. Collins has expressed her interest. Mr. Reyes has expressed his concerns. Are there any other board members who will like to participate in this discussion?
Oh, wait a minute, I don't know, the way you said that, I wasn't too sure what you said. I just wanted to make sure, I have an interest, and I think many of us have an interest, but I really thought we would have an opportunity. And this is important, I'm most appreciative to the councils for bringing it up, but to me, it's extremely important that we get at least some type of in-service training, so that, and it doesn't have to be whatever, but, looking at a job application, looking at what we're looking at for requirements, it's nothing I don't think we're shying away from, but I totally agree. I think the in-service should come before the selection of the individual, and then I think it's fine that we go ahead and identify those individuals. And I don't know if we could look back and look at a historical trend and find out how frequent TPD has had the interview panels. But if we could even go back and look back at least the past 2 to 3 years and say, well, it's an average of 3 a year, or it's an average of 4 a year, so we'll know what we're getting involved with. And then if that person just did one and everybody get it and we get a feel for it, but I still feel I'm willing, I trust you too, but I would love to see some form of training, even if you guys set up a date and told us, okay, this is when we're going to do the training. Everybody can do it, whether it's by Zoom or whether we come in or whatever, but do some kind of preliminary training for us.
Understood. And your concerns are noted, understood, and we will certainly bring these back in July. So if what I'm hearing from you is that nobody wants, it sounds like, we were coming here with a request that we get a name tonight so that we can start working with them for August. If nobody feels comfortable with that tonight, understanding your reservations and not being trained yet, just know that we probably will have to do the August without, a member from this board present on that, which is fine. I just don't know that if we wait till July, do all the training as a whole, that we're going to be able to get this done in time. So I'm just bringing that up because what we were thinking was, and your concerns are noted and make complete sense, and we are planning on training everybody. We are planning on getting all the specifics we can to you. We understand your reservations. But as far as the August date, if we want someone to participate for the August, we have to get that person on the ground running soon. And so we are going to provide, that person training, reach out to them next week and get them all the details they need for the August meeting. If you want to make it just so that that person only serves the August meeting, and then we figure out how to do a rotation basis in the future, I mean, we can come back and keep working on this as we need to. Right now, we're just asking that somebody be appointed to the board so we can get this started for August.
Is it possible we could get 3 people, 3 or 4 that might be interested in you work with those individuals and we come in July and select one of those individuals? I hear what you're saying. You're asking us to make a motion tonight to select someone. And we may have some people who are willing to do it. But I just thought that, and we knew this was possibly coming, but we also anticipated that there would be a level of
Well, I am eager
training.
to hear from some of the other board members, patiently waiting their turn to voice be heard. Let's continue the discussion, if you will.
No, Dr. Collins,
Mr.
would you be
Tamayo?
interested in serving?
I'm interested, but I want to just get the education, yes.
Well, and Attorney Schmidt has said that you would be educated over the course of the next month. So I mean, if you would like to serve, I would nominate Dr. Collins.
I agree with Mr. Tamayo. We can let Dr. Collins get trained immediately, and then the rest of us can get trained subsequently, but then that way we don't miss the August opportunity.
Right.
Unless there's somebody else outside of Dr. Collins that's interested for August.
Ms. Guy?
I was just gonna say, I think there's some value in going ahead with this, because that way we will definitely understand what I mean, if you go through it, then you certainly can share with the rest of us, you know, what happened with your training and your questions, and I just think there's value in us going ahead and doing it right now.
So I would propose that we nominate Dr. Collins to serve on that initial board for August, but that at our next meeting, using Colonel Reyes's terms, select a duty roster of 3 to 4 CRB members to be in reserve for the following 6 months.
Mr. Tamayo has a motion, nomination for Dr. Collins to begin the process in reference to participating in the new updates under the interview panel. Ms. Simmons has seconded the motion of the nomination of Dr. Collins. Dr. Collins, are you willing to accept such nomination? We can now continue with a vote in reference to the motion that's on the floor to nominate Dr. Collins to begin the process of training and also participating in the applicant interview panel process. If you will, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The motion passes. Congratulations, Dr. Collins.
Don't look at me.
We're definitely eager to for you also to educate and inform us the process and the training as well. Mr. Reyes brought up some great points as well, so some of those things can also be implemented, as well as we will make some changes along the way once we find out what's the process of the interviewing and scheduling and things of that nature to ensure that everyone gets properly trained and also have the opportunity to participate.
The only matter I have as far as staff report is there was something else that we were going to bring to this board. We were going to request to bring back to the board. I think July now is probably full, so I'm not sure we should bring it back in July, but just for the board's knowledge, TPD is working on a mental health co-responder pilot program. That program we're hoping to get kicked off in August, and we would like to bring that program to this board and give an overview of the mental health co-responder pilot program. So maybe that's something we can add to the August agenda. I'm sorry, what?
Dr. Collins, she had a question in reference, you stated that program is going to begin in August?
We're hoping, right. We still have to get certain signatures and things like that, so. It's
open to discussion in reference to the agenda in reference to July, there is somewhat of a full agenda in July. Is this something we
Chairman,
can table?
I would consider that it would be
Reverend Banks?
prudent for us to consider modifying the agenda, as this is one of the important issues in the community as it relates to police responding to calls that could be better handled with mental health professionals. So I think that is important enough for us to consider looking at the agenda to see if it would be feasible to adjust it so that we can have this information presented to us.
Any others? There's,
That would be for the August meeting? Or
July.
It's up to the board.
It's tabled for July.
Since I made the recommendation, Mr. Chair, for the supervisor case to come back,
Could we
Could
look
we move
into
that?
the July agenda and make a decision within the next week or two?
Well, yeah, I mean, we know we have the one case, which obviously you've heard substantially amount of that case already, so I don't think that IA case would be a huge burden on this board as far as time commitment. But we were going to bring back these implementation changes, and obviously you heard the long list of things, and I imagine that's going to be a robust discussion with a lot of good questions from the board. So the only reason I say that is I imagine that's going to take a while. But you know, there's nothing saying that we can't, you know, bring back the co-responder pilot program. We could try to do, I think that's a lot. I'm just you know, we may be here a long time. If we keep both of those on there, we could do the pilot program in July and maybe the discussions for August. So, I mean, it's really up to the board's pleasure. Or we can try both of them in July. The only reason I'm saying that is I don't know that anything's going to change between tonight and in 2 weeks from now. I think that's where we're at. I think we know that going through the implementation of all these changes is going to take some time. And then as well as this mental health co-responder pilot program, you know, that's probably going to be I would just anticipate a 30-minute presentation maybe.
Vice Chair, Ms. Scott?
Would it be out of bounds to possibly put together a workshop for us to go through the ordinance? Because I think sitting here in our regular meeting, I'm not sure we're going to have enough time for all of us to get all of our concerns out and figure out how we're going to do the things that are in the ordinance. You know, we've done workshops before. I just think that just doing it at this meeting is going to be very cumbersome. And it's not like we're voting on whether we're doing it or not. We're not. You know, so we're really just having a discussion on how we're going to implement these things.
That's correct.
So, you know, I'll just throw that out.
Yeah, I think the workshop would be a
Simmons.
good idea, and then also if we could get the changes from Mr. Brody like a week before the workshop, so we have an opportunity to read it and bring thoughtful questions. But you're right, we've done workshops several in the past, and they've been very effective.
thank you.
And so then July, we could have the mental health co-responder pilot program, the one case, and then this board can decide when to hold a workshop for the implementation of the policy, the new CRB board
Ordinance update.
ordinance, yes.
Are you saying that we're gonna decide when we're gonna schedule the workshop at the July meeting?
No, you could
Oh.
decide that tonight if you
Oh.
wanted to.
Well, I believe Mr. Brody said that we're going to have the marked up ordinance quickly, right? I mean, it's there. So if we get that, you know, then it doesn't take much for us. I mean, we're going to have a place to meet, and, you know, that it does take some coordination, but, you know, the sooner the better to me, that we sit down and go through it and make sure that we're doing what's in that ordinance, and if there's changes that we need to make.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment.
Will, Mr. Banks.
I concur. It's just that the ordinance is going to be an ongoing process of implementation. But the idea of this mental health component, much of what has happened in law enforcement is initiated as a result of not having that mental health component on the scene when these things occur. So it's almost like both of them are important, but one of them is going to be ongoing. The other one, if the public is aware, we're aware that the police department is addressing this issue that is a concern to all of us, that it may be helpful in terms of informational as well.
Yes, sir.
And this was a request, and again, returned to us and scheduled for the next upcoming meeting. Therefore, with the new case that we would like to review, they're gonna need some time to put that together anyway. So it's probably best to table the proposed case that the board wanted to review tonight in reference to the supervisor case, table that into August and continue with the regular scheduled agenda for the pilot program in July. Any further discussion needed?
Let me clarify. I thought Mr. Smith said that's exactly what he was going to, would have time to do the case and review the mental health co-responder at the same meeting. Did I misunderstand that?
I believe we would have time to do both of those, yes.
You don't think there would be time to do both of those?
No, I do.
Okay.
I believe there would be.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, yeah,
Especially
okay.
if we're gonna do the workshop, and there should be time.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah, good.
So I think we all are in agreement with continuing with the pilot program presentation in July,
So we,
as well as continuing with the review and investigation, item F.
We'll do the other as a workshop.
And under next month's agenda, under CRB staff reports and business, we can discuss time, place, and date of the workshop and get that coordinated and get a better idea on how we're going to implement that. Any further announcements and further questions for Mr. Smith? Hearing none, that would conclude item H, staff reports and business. We will now move on to announcements for the next meeting. We have penciled in an agenda for the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to be held on the 4th Tuesday of the month of July, which falls on July 27th, 2021, here at Old City Hall at 315 East Kennedy Boulevard, Tampa, Florida, 3rd floor at 6 p.m. Board members have any thoughts, comments, statements?
We're gonna be here.
I unfortunately will not be able to be here. I'll be out of town that week.
Mr. Tamayo gave notification.
We are attached to the Winds 1 month at Academy Prep, 11-month school years, and I need to get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Relax, so I will not, unfortunately, no, but there are some issues that I really am interested in discussing and hearing about. I'm sorry I'm going to miss the mental health component of that discussion.
Actually, that would be July the 28th,
July 28th.
27th.
27th?
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you for the notification. If there are any other board members for any reason are unable to attend the next meeting, please notify our city clerk, Ms. Mercer, at least 48 hours in advance so we can ensure a voting quorum. Before I adjourn this meeting, I'd like to give any of our board members the opportunity to add any final comments or statements at this time.
Mr. Chairman, let me
Reverend
thank
Banks.
Councilman Goose for reaching out to us and getting our feedback on the ordinance. I did not have an opportunity to get back with you, but I did concur with all of the recommendations that the City Council put together. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, for your presence here tonight as well.
And my comment
Dr.
is.
Collins?
Yeah, I also thank the councilmen for being here and being present. And because they are here, and I know the night is long, I'd like to ask if they wanted to make a statement, if we would allow them to at least come up, because part of why we're here and what's going on is the recommendation that have come from the council. And I would hate to have them here, and we don't often have them here, and they don't, both. So I thank both of you for being here.
Thank you and welcome.
Councilman Orlando Goods, Chairman of Tampa City Council for District 5. Well, I want to thank you for the hard work you've been doing over the few years you've been here. It's hard doing this job, but I felt some of the things that were going on in the community, some things we were hearing, we needed to kind of strengthen the board a little bit. That's why I made that recommendation to strengthen the board, and my colleagues thought the same. It was a tough, hard road, but again, this board, with the mayor, we came up with some ideas. I want to thank the mayor because the mayor and the chief put a lot of the ideas the council talked about into the ordinance. So I must give her kudos for doing that. The decisions were tough to make because, again, you know, we have the police and the morale was down with all things that were going on in the country, but the citizens were angry as well about some police reform. So we had to make some compromises in the end. I'm glad that we did make some compromises. We still got some work we have to do. But this is a starting point, a good starting point for the city, for our citizens, and I'm just happy to be a part of it, to get it moving down the road. And I believe on Thursday, we'll be signing the ordinance on Thursday with myself, some of the council members, and I believe we've invited the CRB to be there as well for the signing of the ordinance. So again, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Joseph Citro, Tampa City Council, District 1, for the record. I concur with what my colleague has said. Your job is very important, and you are all volunteers for this. And I hope you understand that the people are relying on you. This board is going to now become organic. This board is going to be forever growing. You're going to be having 2 more members joining this board. And I cannot wait until January when this board comes to present itself to City Council. Tell us what you like, what you may not like, what you need, and some changes that, again, will keep this board growing and forever changing. I thank you again for volunteering for this board, and I appreciate each and every one of you for doing what you do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And on that note, there aren't any final statements. The Citizen Review Board is now adjourned.